Arthur is a kids' TV show that has been around since the late 90s and is still on to this day. It's one of the weirdest reality-based shows that sets examples for kids. I grew up with it and I still watch it on weekday mornings when I don't have school. This story, though, will explain what has soured me from buying other old episodes on tape. I had written this description of the episode a few years back and left it on my computer, and after much thoughts, I have decided to release it. I honestly wish this tape had survived long enough for me to get a couple of screenshots from it, but alas, the film tore badly and during repairs I lost all but 5 minutes of the episode. The tape was bought secondhand about a month ago from my normal secondhand media store, the Corner Store. For those of you who don't live in central Alberta, it's an old music store that became a secondhand book/movie store some time ago. I bought almost 100 VHS tapes from them, all of which work perfectly fine. Except for this one. I bought the tape because I was trying to find the old episodes of Arthur again to bring back good memories of my childhood. I loved that show, and I still watch it to this day. As all should know, they still make it, and the new ones are nothing to brag about. The animation looks cheap and rather rushed, the stories are often dull and focus on the mental illnesses in children, like the one about the kids with Asperger's and the one where they deal with cancer. Completely feels out of place. Characters have also changed. The bullies are now good guys, Francine is even more of a bitch, and DW no longer has moments that make her seem more like than a spoiled brat. The show has been ruined. To escape this mess, I went out to buy some old episodes on tape. Home recordings are of a particular interest, so I could see some of the old commercials that had aired about at the time. I bought around $5 worth of old tapes, each at 50 cents each. They all seemed fine. Each was properly labeled with episode times, recording dates, and timestamps. The one that caught my eye was the title Death of Grandma, recorded on March 5th, 1998, with a lone timestamp of 15 minutes 24 seconds lost the channel. It was an episode I did not know, from an air date that seemed almost too old to be trusted. I noticed the title had been written on a patch of whiteout. I decided against scraping it off. Perhaps it was a recording of something in the people's lives or something? I decided to watch that first. The beginning was the opening of Arthur. The themes sounded a bit tinny, probably due to bad recording equipment. The tape had issues that troubled me, mainly the tracking. I just couldn't get it to stop being jumpy and awkward to watch. I eventually gave up, leaving it to where there was a line of fuzz across the top and sat down. There was no opening title for the episode. It showed the Elwood City Hospital, something I wasn't very familiar with. The sad music was playing. There only was one car in the parking lot, was that of the Reeds. It cut to Arthur and DW in the waiting room. Arthur was reading a Scare Your Pants Off book while DW pestered him about the story. The volume was bad, making it hard for me to listen to. I'll do my best to try and recreate what they were saying, though it is rather hard to remember. DW: Why won't you play with me, Arthur? I'm bored! Why are we even here? Arthur: Shut up, DW, I'm trying to read. The parents came down the hall. The mom was crying and the dad looked shocked. DW ran to them, asking why Arthur was ignoring her. The dad told her to sit down. Arthur's dad: Now, kids, I'm afraid that we won't be seeing Grandma Thora again. She's gone to a better place. He broke down into tears. As always, the voice acting was pretty good. Arthur dropped his book in shock and stared. They sat there unmoving, and the tape rippled with static as the parents' crying looped over and over again. It then cut to them at home. The mom was talking on the phone, looking sad but acting professional. DW was staring at the TV, but it was on a blank screen. Baby Kate was just sitting there unmoving. The dad was making a wedding cake. His face was grim. The doorbell rang, and Arthur opened the door, and it was Buster. Buster: Hey, I heard what happened. You want to go down to the sugar bowl and talk? Arthur: Sure. A shot of the sugar bowl appeared, but there was no music, only wind blowing. I noticed that it was fall in this episode as dead leaves littered the ground. Arthur and Buster were sitting there, not talking, not moving. It reminded me of the still frames that sometimes appeared in the old TMNT show. Buster spoke, but his mouth wasn't moving with the words at all. Buster: We should go do something fun to cheer ourselves up. Arthur just stared at him, eyes blank. It jumped suddenly to the funeral. Everyone was in black. There was no music, only crying. The casket was a pure white draped with flowers. It showed Arthur, his face wet with tears before the imagination sound cue came up. The casket opened up, and it wasn't Grandma Thora, but instead his mom. Her face was heavily wrinkled, like in the episode where DW got lost in the mall and was thinking about what life would have been like without her. Her teeth were showing, and the color was off, being more of a yellow than a normal white. Her eyes suddenly opened up, and they were not human, but rather black button eyes like on Arthur's pet stuffed bear Stanley. He screamed, and everyone vanished, leaving him alone in the church. The walls fell in, exposing a red and black streak in sky. DW's laughter could be heard high and rapid. There was a loud bang, and the images stopped. Arthur was sitting there with his face pale. His mom was whispering something to Dad. DW was crying. They were walking in a single file line to the coffin. As Arthur got closer, you could hear the buzzing of flies. He swallowed and wiped his eyes. The coffin lid was opened. He looked in, and there was a shot of his face. He was enraged. There was a flash of white, and the sound was gone for a moment. Suddenly, they were in the car again. The episode ended. As for the commercials, they really weren't anything amazing, just some ads for Chick-fil-A and KSPS. The next part did have a title, Recovery. It was written on a plain white background. I could hear DW screaming like when Arthur punched her before the episode started up. The family was at home, and it seemed a continuation of the previous part. DW was in her room, solemnly playing with her dolls. The parents were reminiscing over photos, and Arthur was in his room. When Pal came in and started barking at him, wanting to play, Arthur got up and kicked the dog. He kept kicking him, the soundtrack now consisting of Pal's yelps before slamming his door shut. Kate started crying. Arthur gritted his teeth, and the scene faded out. The next scene showed that it was nighttime as Arthur crept out of his room, with his backpack on his shoulder. He walked past Pal, who was whining, who whined and drew away, before grabbing his coat and sneaking out. He ran for a good 3 minutes, the streets all in shadow. There was music, very soft, normal, happy music that we all knew from the show. That ended, though, when he ran into the graveyard. He stopped at his grandmother's grave, staring at it. There was an owl hooting sound, and he started digging, crying out in pain as he did. His bare hands were soon slicked in dark red blood, and he stopped, finding the coffin. He was crying now. The coffin opened, and Arthur was inside of it. His eyes were closed, and his glasses were shattered. His family gathered around and stared down and crying. Kate was screaming, and for whatever reason, DW threw Pal into the open grave. Although his body was unmoving, there was a still of him running. The screen went to black, and there was a low sound that rose to a high chatter. It was the Tibbles laughing. The grave started to spin in empty space, opening and sucking the world into it. I could hear DW yelling, "Kate did it!" over and over again, mixed with Pal's cries of pain. Stanley appeared, spiraling down through the blackness. His head tore off, and his cartoony organs from the episode where Arthur cut his knee started trailing out from his body. There was a series of loud thuds, and it showed Arthur again, sitting there in the sugar bowl. Buster was unmoving on the floor beside the booth, his eyes gone. The red socket started to stream blood, and Arthur screamed in rage. There was a few white flashes, and then it showed him in prison, wearing the black and white clothing the show always used. His face was covered in scars. They showed on bad guys sometimes. His last words were louder than the other speech clips. Arthur: "I killed them all! I beat out Kate's brains and stabbed DW! I killed my dog! My parents ate poison! But I didn't do it! She did it! Thor did it! She made me kill them!" It cut to the credits, and it was the normal cheery music. Stunned, I went to rewind the tape to see if what I just saw was real or if it was just a dream. When I tried to rewind the video, the tape seized up, so I took the tape and opened it up. The film had split an inch from one reel all the way down to a few inches from the other one. Either what I had just witnessed was one of the worst things to ever be associated with a children's cartoon, or I'm just off my nut. I will never know. I remember it pretty well, though, suggesting that it was real. And if this was made by some sick fuck as a joke, I give him a thumbs up on making something that seems so real, like it was actually a part of the series. After all, the video had never cut out like it said in the tape, unless it had on what had originally been recorded. But now that I think about it, since the show always covers very real topics, could this have been a real episode they only aired once? I mean, they did one on DW's bird dying, but never one on abuse or anything. If it really was a real episode, and I'm almost hoping it is, I'm intrigued and I really want to see it again, to prove myself that I'm not going absolutely insane. And that, my little shadows, was Arthur the Lost episode, The Death of Grandma. A Arthur Lost episode creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? Pretty good pasta, actually. I'd have to say, this one did a really darn good job. I mean, not only did they manage to incorporate the usual kind of cliches like thrift stores and, VHS tapes and things like that in such a way that's original, but everything else within this episode doesn't exactly seem like completely out of the ordinary for something that, Arthur would honestly be. Now, here's my thing when it comes to Arthur. I loved watching that when I was a young kid. I remember it being one of the few things I watched on PBS Kids almost all the time. In fact, I still enjoy it, mostly because of the fact that compared to most other shows on PBS Kids, this one was actually a lot more, well, I wouldn't exactly say mature, but it was a lot more entertaining on that matter than compared to like other shows that really just kind of were more geared down to younger children. But I mean, Author was a good show. I mean, I haven't watched it in a while, but I think one time when I went to a flea market or a thrift store once, I think it might have been a Salvation Army. I think one of the TVs that were there were showing showing an Arthur episode, and let me tell you, people, it looks terrible. Like, I get it that Flash animation's a pretty interesting kind of thing, and by the way, for anybody wondering, Flash is gonna die in 2021, unfortunately, so yeah, that's gonna really stink. I mean, I get it that 3D and everything is popular, but come on, nothing's better than sitting there and having a good hand-drawn cartoon. Okay, I'm getting completely out of what I'm trying to say here. Um, but ultimately, I do remember watching a couple of the newer episodes, and let me tell you, like the story says, it's boring. Like, it doesn't have that same charm to it like it did. I mean, everything in Flash just doesn't look right. I mean, Fairly Odd Parents started doing that whenever they were really dying off, which I guess is kind of a bad flag or whatever, or like, I don't know, whenever you know that a show's really starting to go down if they start, morphing down into crazy amounts of Flash. But my goodness, people, it was not fun to watch. I mean, mostly for the visuals, honestly. I mean, all the other characters were okay, but the Flash animation alone was the one thing that really ruined it. I couldn't watch any more of it. I watched I watched like an episode or two of it. I would never watch it again. Like the animation was so unreal and just so stiff. It made me uncomfortable to honestly watch. It was God. I mean, I don't have a problem with Flash animation. I mean, people can do it well. It just doesn't work good for a show that was primarily hand-drawn, I think. Or at least painted, I don't know. But yeah, what does this have to do with the review? I don't know, but I am going to be getting into the whole review now. This story, like I said before, was a pretty good concept, a good creepypasta, and it actually incorporated cliches in a way that was very believable. And that's something that's not a particularly easy thing to do. It's actually a very difficult thing to do, but this story managed to knock it out the park with this one. I don't know if this one's still on the Creepypasta Wikia. I think it might be on it, but I'm not gonna bet my money on it. I hope it is, because it's a very well done Creepypasta. It genuinely is. But even with that being said, though, I love the storyline behind the whole thing. I love the believability of it all. And, now this is where I'm going to get to my negative sides with this. I'd have to say the one main negative thing I have with the story is the fact that it's just really, really, really confusing and a little bizarre at times. Mostly because of the fact that, I mean, I get it, it's a creepypasta, but there wasn't really much context to what exactly caused Arthur to sit there and react the way that he did. I mean, there's not much evidence really supporting that he actually did kill his parents or kill everybody else or whatever it may seem to be, although there was that one part where Arthur had pretty much gouged out Buster's eyes, which is pretty gross if you ask me, but kind of cool. But with all due sincerity, I mean, it was really, really confusing. It was hard to really kind of keep up with what was going on. Because, I mean, I get it that Arthur's, grandmother unfortunately passed away, but the whole bizarre aspects of it was more like an acid trip than an episode. I mean, this sounds like something a YouTube pooper would probably wind up doing compared to a normal, writer or something. Which I honestly could believe that somebody could have made something like that and posted it up on there. How they would get the voice actors, I don't know, but still. I mean, I think that's like my biggest downside with the story is the fact that there is not really a whole lot of reasoning for everything happening in the episode. See, I mean, that's usually that's my own personal preference when it comes to lost episodes. There has to be a reason for what the characters are doing in their specific episodes, otherwise it won't make sense. And in this one, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, does it kill the story? No. No, not at all. It's still a relatively entertaining storyline, and I found it to be probably one of the better versions of it. One of the best ones I honestly can say I enjoyed the most. But even then, though, like I always say, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story would have to be a 9 out of 10. It's a good creepypasta, it's definitely really well made, very well done, and very interesting. But the episode itself, I think, more or less, could have used a little bit more of a reason why everything happened the way that it did, instead of just kind of going into this LSD mind trip kind of deal. I mean, maybe that's just my own preferences on that one, but still, I think that there could have been a bit more of a better explanation or a storyline behind what was going on in Arthur's head, or like outside of it, that could have caused something like that. Because while a death is particularly tragic, I highly doubt that something like this, unless you're really mentally unhinged, would cause you to sit there and dig up your grandmother's grave and then kill everybody in almost an instant and then blame your dead grandma for it. I mean, I don't know. But what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? Also, what would you have personally done to help make the story a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I'm the Shadow Reader, thanks again for watching today's episode, and like always, roll the outro, Otterton, because I'm out. In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.